The acid rain had finally stopped, leaving the crumbling city slick and glistening under the sickly yellow sky. Kaylee's moved silently across the rubble, her six-fingered hand gripping a makeshift spear fashioned from scavenged metal. The translucent scales along her forearms shifted from gray to the mottled brown of the concrete around her, a natural camouflage that had saved her life countless times in the 7 years since the collapse. 7 years of solitude, 7 years as the last of her kind on this dying planet. The humans had called her people Sarians, visitors from a distant star who had come to Earth for diplomatic and scientific exchange. They had been welcomed at first, until the cataclysm that followed. When the atmosphere began to change and the first mutations appeared, the humans turned on their alien visitors with predictable savagery. Blame came easy when facing extinction. Her people had fled in their ships, but in the chaos, Kaylee's had been left behind. Sometimes she wondered if it had been an accident at all. A low, guttural howl echoed between the skeletal buildings, snapping her to attention. Skitters, that's what she called the wolf-sized predators that hunted in packs. Once dogs, perhaps, now twisted by radiation and chemical runoff into something nightmarish. Kaylee's pressed herself against a wall, her breathing shallow. Her enhanced vision scanned the streets, spotting the heat signatures of a skitter pack moving 3 blocks east. Too close. She needed to move. The abandoned supermarket ahead had been her target for days. If she was lucky, there might still be sealed packages the scavengers hadn't found. Her own supplies were dangerously low. As she darted across an open space, her foot caught on twisted rebar. She stumbled, sending a cascade of debris tumbling down the rubble heap. The noise was deafening in the eerie silence. The howls changed direction immediately. Kaylee's cursed in her native tongue, the sound like liquid glass breaking. She wrenched her foot free and limped toward the supermarket's shattered entrance, knowing she couldn't outrun the pack now. Inside, she frantically searched for high ground. The skitters couldn't climb well, but what they lacked in vertical mobility, they made up for in numbers and ferocity. She had just pulled herself onto a collapsed shelving unit when the first of them appeared, hairless, with too many legs and exposed, glistening teeth. Its flesh was translucent, pulsing with visible veins. The abomination sniffed the air, its head swiveling unnaturally as it caught her scent. It screamed, a sound that was once a bark, now a tortured human-like wail, and leaped toward her perch. Kaylee struck out with her spear, catching it in the shoulder. Black ichor sprayed across the floor. More skitters poured in, circling beneath her. Kaylee's counted at least 7, too many. Her perch wouldn't hold, and her makeshift weapon wouldn't keep them at bay forever. This was it, then? After surviving the collapse, after years of isolation and desperate survival, she would die here, torn apart by the mutated remnants of Earth's once gentle creatures. The crack of gunfire shattered her thoughts. One skitter's head exploded in a spray of black, then another. The pack turned toward the new threat, advancing on something, someone beyond Kaylee's view. 3 more shots, precisely placed. The remaining skitters retreated, dragging their wounded as they fled through a hole in the back wall. Kaylee's held her position, spear ready. She had learned that one danger often followed another. The humans who survived were frequently more dangerous than the monsters. A figure stepped into view, rifle held casually at his side. Human, male, tall with dark hair streaked with premature gray and a beard that couldn't hide the scar running from his right eye to his jaw. He wore practical survival gear cobbled together from different sources, layers of leather and canvas for protection against both teeth and radiation. "You can come down," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "They won't be back soon." Kaylee's remained motionless, her scales rippling with caution patterns. The man sighed. "Suit yourself." He turned to go, then paused. "But you're bleeding. That cut gets infected out here. You're dead in 3 days. I've got supplies, your choice." For the first time, Kaylee's noticed the warm trickle down her leg where the rebar had sliced her. On her homeworld, the wound would heal quickly. Here, on toxic Earth, even a minor injury could be fatal. She had survived this long by trusting no one, but she had also survived by knowing when to take calculated risks. "Why help me?" she finally asked, her English perfect but with a musical lilt that marked her as non-human. The man studied her with eyes that had seen too much death. "Because I'm still human enough to remember what that means." He gestured toward the street. "I'm Daniel Carter, and you're the first person, human or otherwise, I've spoken to in 3 years." Kaylee's hesitated, then slowly descended from her perch, wincing as her injured leg took her weight. "I am Kaylee's," she said, "and I do not trust you." For the first time, something like a smile crossed Daniel's weathered face. "Good, trust gets you killed these days." He nodded toward the wound. "But so does stubbornness. Come on, my shelter's not far." As they stepped out into the toxic twilight, Kaylee's kept her distance, spear ready. But deep inside, beneath layers of survival instinct and learned distrust, something stirred, something she hadn't felt in 7 long years. She was no longer alone. Daniel's shelter turned out to be an old bank vault, buried beneath the collapsed remains of a financial district. The massive steel door, designed to withstand explosions and break-ins, now protected against dangers its makers never imagined. He'd modified the entrance with a series of traps and false pathways that would confuse even the most intelligent predators. "Watch your step," Daniel warned as he guided Kaylee's through the final corridor. "Pressure plate there, touch it, and you'll have 3 seconds before the ceiling drops." Kaylee studied his handiwork with grudging admiration, primitive but effective. Daniel glanced back at her, one eyebrow raised. "Primitive got me through 7 years of hell." Inside the vault, Kaylee's was surprised by the order amid chaos. Daniel had assembled a living space with methodical precision. A sleeping area, a makeshift kitchen with filtered water collection, shelves of salvaged supplies, and even a small garden under artificial light, stunted plants struggling to grow in Earth's changed atmosphere. "Sit," Daniel instructed, gesturing to a chair fashioned from car seats. He rummaged through a metal cabinet and returned with a first aid kit. "Let me see that leg." Kaylee's hesitated. On her world, allowing a stranger this close would be unthinkable. "I won't hurt you," Daniel said, reading her expression. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have left you to the skitters." Logic prevailed. She extended her injured leg, the scaled skin around the wound already showing the telltale purple inflammation that meant infection was setting in. Earth bacteria were particularly aggressive against her alien physiology. Daniel cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. "Your blood," he noted, examining the silvery fluid. "It's different than I remember." "You've seen my kind injured before?" Kaylee's asked sharply. "Before everything went to hell, I worked security at one of the joint research facilities." He applied a yellowish paste to her wound. "Herbal antibiotic. Best I can do. You people had better medicine, but—" "But my people took it when they fled," Kaylee's finished bitterly. Daniel wrapped her leg with a clean bandage. "There, not hospital grade, but it'll help." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, filled with the weight of shared history. A history where his kind had turned on hers and hers had abandoned his. "Why were you left behind?" Daniel finally asked, packing away his supplies. Kaylee stiffened. "I was stationed at an outpost studying Earth's botanical systems. When the evacuation order came, our transport was delayed." Her four-pupiled eyes darkened. "The last ships left without us. My team tried to reach a secondary evacuation point, but we were attacked by human militants. I was the only survivor." Daniel nodded, his face unreadable. Humans feared what they didn't understand. When the mutations started, blaming aliens was easier than accepting our own responsibility. "And what do you believe?" Kaylee's challenged. "I believe we all lost," he said simply. "Human alien much matter now." He stood and moved to his storage area, returning with a canteen and packet of dried food. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow we need to move." "Move, why?" Kaylee's accepted the food cautiously. "The gunshots will draw attention, not just skitters. There are other survivors out there, the kind that shoot first and never bother with questions." He checked his rifle, methodically counting bullets. "I know a place further west, more secure, better hunting." "You assume I'm going with you?" Kaylee's observed. Daniel met her gaze steadily. "You're injured in a world that wants you dead. I'm offering help, not captivity. Stay or go, your choice." Kaylee studied him, searching for deceit. Her people were empathic, not telepathic, but she could sense emotional undercurrents. Daniel radiated caution, wariness, and something else, loneliness so profound it was almost a physical wound. "Why help an alien?" she pressed. "Your kind blames mine for all this." A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "My daughter liked your people," he said quietly. "She was 8 when the mutations took her. She didn't blame anyone, neither do I." The raw pain in his voice silenced her questions. Kaylee's looked away, suddenly ashamed of her suspicion. She examined the food packet, a military ration long expired but still sealed. Safe enough. I will go with you, she decided. Until my leg heals, then we will reassess. Daniel nodded, accepting the temporary arrangement without comment. He continued his preparations for tomorrow's journey, moving with the efficiency of someone who had packed and fled many times before. As night fell, Kaylee's observed how Daniel's security system included multiple escape routes and strategically placed weapons. Trust was a luxury in this new world, but competence was valuable, and Daniel Carter was clearly competent. You should sleep, he told her, interrupting her thoughts. I'll take first watch. Kaylee shook her head. My kind requires less rest than humans. I will watch while you sleep. Daniel hesitated, his hand never straying far from his weapon. How do I know you won't kill me in my sleep? The same way I know you won't kill me in mine, she replied. Necessity, two survive better than one in this world. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Pragmatic. Survival usually is. Daniel considered, then nodded. He handed her a smaller handgun. Wake me in 4 hours or if you hear anything unusual, and Kaylee's, his eyes locked with hers. Don't mistake this for trust. I wouldn't dream of it, she replied coolly. As Daniel stretched out on his bedroll, keeping his rifle within reach, Kaylee's positioned herself near one of the small ventilation shafts that provided a view of the approach to their shelter. The yellow-tinged moonlight cast eerie shadows across the ruined landscape. In the quiet darkness, she found herself studying Daniel's face as he slept. The hard lines remained, but something vulnerable emerged, echoes of the man he had been before the world ended. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Did he see an alien, an enemy, or simply another survivor? 4 hours passed quickly. When she moved to wake him, Daniel was already alert, his hand gripping his rifle before his eyes fully opened. The reaction of someone who had learned to sleep lightly or die. No threats, she reported. Though something large moved through the eastern perimeter about an hour ago, it didn't approach. Daniel nodded, silently appreciating her detailed report. Get some rest. We leave at first light. As Kaylee settled onto the bedroll Daniel had vacated, still warm from his body heat, she felt an unexpected sense of security. Just hours ago, she had been alone, as she had been for years. Now she shared shelter with a human, a species she had been taught to fear and later learned to hate. Yet as sleep began to claim her, Kaylee's realized that in this moment, what mattered wasn't that Daniel was human, but that he was there. After 7 years of crushing solitude, the simple sound of another person's breathing was strangely comforting. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new reasons for distrust. But tonight, in the darkness of a dead world, 2 survivors from different stars had found something unexpected, a fragile alliance born of necessity and shaped by shared trauma. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. They had been traveling for 3 days, moving only at dawn and dusk when the mutated predators were least active. Daniel led them through the ruins with the confidence of someone who had mapped every safe path, every potential shelter, and every deadly trap that the broken world had to offer. Kaylee's followed, her leg healing faster than expected thanks to Daniel's herbal remedy and her own alien physiology. She studied his movements, the way he read the landscape, how he could spot danger in the shifting of debris or the unnatural silence of the air. He was a product of this apocalypse, shaped by it, hardened by it, yet somehow not consumed by it. There, Daniel pointed toward a structure in the distance, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. Home, sweet home. Kaylee squinted, her 4-pupiled eyes adjusting to focus. It looks unstable. That's the point, Daniel replied with a hint of pride. Nobody looks twice at a collapsed building. Best place to hide is somewhere everyone thinks is already dead. As they approached, Kaylee's realized the apparent structural damage was an elaborate camouflage. What appeared to be a crumbling facade concealed a fortified entrance, and the wild vegetation had been carefully cultivated to provide both cover and sustenance. You planned this, she observed. This isn't just somewhere you found. Daniel nodded as he disabled a series of nearly invisible tripwires. Took me 2 years to build. After my first shelter was raided, I learned not to improvise. His voice hardened at the memory. Lost everything that time, almost lost myself. The interior was a revelation. What had once been an underground research facility had been transformed into a self-contained living space with multiple rooms. Solar panels, partially hidden on the roof, provided limited power. A sophisticated water filtration system collected rainwater. Most impressive was a sealed greenhouse chamber where Daniel had cultivated rare, uncontaminated plants. Kaylee struggled to find the words. You've created an ecosystem. Trying to, Daniel admitted, setting down his pack. Most seeds won't germinate anymore, the soil's too toxic, but these, he gestured to several thriving plants with deep blue leaves. These adapted somehow, mutation working in our favor for once. Kaylee's approached the plants with professional interest. Before the collapse, she'd been a xenobotanist, studying the integration of Earth flora with specimens from her world. These have altered their cellular structure to process radiation, she noted, gently touching a leaf. Fascinating. For the first time, Daniel looked at her with something other than caution. You know plants. It was my specialty, she said softly, memories of her previous life surfacing. I was part of the agricultural exchange program. We were developing hybrid crops that could withstand harsh conditions. Her voice turned bitter. Ironic that we were preparing for a disaster while creating one. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved to a cabinet and retrieved a small object wrapped in cloth. Maybe you can help with this, then? He unwrapped it, revealing a small container filled with tiny black seeds. Found these in a sealed laboratory. No idea what they are, but they've resisted every attempt to grow them. Kaylee's took the container carefully, examining the seeds with expert eyes. These are terrorless seeds from my world. They need specific conditions. She looked up, a spark of excitement in her eyes. With your greenhouse, we might be able to cultivate them. They're incredibly nutritious and naturally radiation-resistant. Something changed in the atmosphere between them. A shift from mere cooperation to genuine collaboration. For the next few hours, they worked together preparing a special growing medium for the alien seeds. Daniel's practical knowledge of Earth's changed conditions complemented Kaylee's scientific expertise. As night fell, they sat before a small cooking fire, sharing a meal of Daniel's preserved supplies, supplemented with edible parts of his greenhouse plants. The usual tense silence had given way to cautious conversation. Your daughter, Kaylee said hesitantly. What was her name? Daniel stilled, his spoon halfway to his mouth. For a moment she thought she'd crossed an unspoken boundary, then he set the spoon down. Ellie, he said, his voice rough. Elena officially, but no one ever called her that. She was curious about everything. When your people first arrived, she collected every news clip, every photo. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She had a theory that aliens would save Earth from itself. Kaylee's looked down at her hands. We failed her. We all failed her, Daniel corrected. Human, alien, doesn't matter who started it. We all watched it happen. He rubbed a hand across his face. What about you, family? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her about her personal life in so long. My life partner and I separated before I came to Earth, she said slowly. It was uncommon among my kind to choose science over family bonds. He didn't understand my work. She traced a pattern on the floor absently. My parents were researchers too. They were on the first evacuation ships. They just left you? Daniel asked. They wouldn't have known I was stranded, Kaylee said, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her doubt. Communication systems failed during the chaos. I have to believe they searched. Daniel nodded, not pushing further. He understood the comfort of necessary illusions. Later, as Kaylee settled into the sleeping quarters Daniel had prepared for her, a small room with actual linens, a luxury she had forgotten, she realized something had shifted between them. The walls they had built remained, but windows had appeared, allowing glimpses of the people they once were. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that Daniel Carter was the first person in 7 years who had spoken to her as Kaylee's, not as an alien. The scream tore through her dreams, jolting her awake. Kaylee's leapt to her feet, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. Another cry, Daniel's voice raw with terror. She rushed to his room, finding him thrashing in his sleep, fighting invisible enemies. No, he moaned. Not her, take me, not Ellie. Without thinking, Kaylee's knelt beside him. Daniel, she called. When he didn't respond, she touched his shoulder. Daniel, wake up, it's just a dream. He came awake violently, grabbing her wrist with bruising force, his other hand already reaching for a weapon. Recognition dawned slowly in his eyes. Kaylee's, he breathed, releasing her instantly. I'm sorry I didn't. It's all right, she assured him, rubbing her wrist. You were dreaming. Daniel sat up, running a shaking hand through his hair. Sweat glistened on his skin in the dim emergency lighting. Did I hurt you? No, she lied. The skin around her wrist was already darkening where his fingers had dug in. Do you have these dreams often? A humorless laugh escaped him. Only when I sleep. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, clearly not intending to return to rest. Go back to sleep, I'm fine. Instead, Kaylee settled on the floor beside his bed, her back against the wall. My people have a practice, she said quietly. When nightmares come, we keep watch for each other. It helps to know you're not alone with the darkness. Daniel stared at her, confusion and vulnerability warring on his face. Then, wordlessly, he leaned back against his pillow, though he remained sitting upright. They stayed that way until dawn, neither sleeping, neither speaking. Just two souls keeping the darkness at bay for each other. When morning came, Daniel rose and began preparing a simple breakfast as if nothing had happened. But when he handed Kaylee's her portion, their fingers brushed, and he held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded, accepting both the food and the gratitude with equal grace. That day, as they worked together in the greenhouse, the silences between them were different, no longer filled with suspicion, but with a growing understanding that perhaps survival meant more than just staying alive. Perhaps it also meant remembering how to live. As Kaylee's gently planted the seeds from her world into the soil of Earth, she wondered if something else might be taking root as well. Something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. Hope. 3 weeks had passed since they had arrived at Daniel's sanctuary. 3 weeks of cautious coexistence that had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a partnership built on mutual respect and growing trust. The alien seeds Kaylee's had planted were beginning to sprout, delicate silver-blue shoots reaching toward the artificial light. Daniel had constructed specialized containers according to her specifications, and together they had created a microclimate that mimicked her homeworld's conditions. Kaylee's was adjusting the nutrient flow when she felt it, a faint vibration against her skin that made her scales ripple in response. She froze, focusing on the sensation. What's wrong? Daniel asked, immediately alert to her change in posture. I'm not sure, she replied, moving toward the eastern wall of the facility. I feel something, a signal. Daniel frowned. What kind of signal? Subspace communications, Kaylee's explained, pressing her palm against the concrete wall. My people use quantum resonance for long-distance communication. Most humans can't detect it, but my species evolved to sense these frequencies. She closed her eyes, concentrating. It's faint, but it's definitely one of our relay beacons. Daniel watched her, his expression unreadable. What does that mean? Kaylee's turned to him, her four-pupiled eyes wide with a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It means there might be a functioning communication array nearby, one that could potentially contact my people's ships. The implications hung heavily between them, a way off Earth, a way for Kaylee's to return home. Where? Daniel finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. I can't pinpoint it exactly, she admitted, but it's coming from the northeast, perhaps 30 miles away. Daniel moved to a cabinet and pulled out a faded map, spreading it across the table. Northeast would put it somewhere around here, he said, indicating an area marked with red cross-hatching. Problem is, that's nest territory. Kaylee's had heard him mention the nests before, areas where the most aggressive and intelligent mutated creatures had established hierarchical colonies. Unlike the solitary skitters or other predators, nest creatures hunted strategically and remembered their enemies. How dangerous? She asked. Very, he said grimly. I've avoided that sector for years, lost 2 good friends trying to pass through it once. Kaylee's studied the map, tracing potential routes with her finger. If the signal is what I think it is, it could be our only chance to contact any ships that might be monitoring Earth's sector. Your only chance, Daniel corrected quietly. The distinction wasn't lost on her. For the first time since they'd met, the fundamental difference in their situations stood starkly between them. Earth was Daniel's home, however broken. For Kaylee's, it had always been a temporary assignment that had become a prison. I need to try, she said finally, looking up at him. I understand if you don't want to risk it. Daniel laughed, though there was little humor in it. And let you wander into a nest alone? Not a chance. He began studying the map more intently. We'd need to approach from the west, using the river as cover. Most of the nest creatures avoid deep water. Relief and gratitude washed over her. Thank you. Daniel looked up, his eyes meeting hers. Don't thank me yet, this could still get us both killed. They spent the next 3 days preparing, gathering supplies and weapons, studying the map, and strategizing their approach. Daniel had modified one of his rifles for Kaylee's, adjusting the grip to better fit her 6-fingered hand and teaching her how to use it with deadly precision. The night before their departure, an unusual tension filled the sanctuary. They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what tomorrow might bring. For Kaylee's, the possibility of contacting her people brought both hope and anxiety. What would she find if she succeeded? Would there even be ships left monitoring Earth's sector after so many years? You're quiet, Daniel observed, breaking into her thoughts. I'm always quiet, she countered, attempting levity. Different kind of quiet, he set down his bowl, having second thoughts. Kaylee's hesitated. Not about going, she said carefully, but about what I might find or not find. Daniel nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Either way, you'll have answers, that's something. Yes, she agreed. Answers. She met his gaze across the small table. What about you? This sanctuary you've spent years building, you're risking it all for a signal that might lead nowhere. I'm not risking it for the signal, he said simply. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Kaylee's felt her scales shimmer with an involuntary response, the bioluminescent patterns revealing emotions she would have preferred to keep hidden. Daniel's eyes tracked the rippling colors across her skin. You never told me what that means, he said softly. When your scales do that. Kaylee's looked down, willing the display to subside. It's a physiological response tied to emotional states. And this particular pattern. She met his eyes again. Confusion, uncertainty, a pause, connection. Daniel reached across the table slowly, telegraphing his movement to give her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, his fingers gently traced the luminescent patterns along her forearm. The touch sent an electric current through her. 7 years, he murmured. 7 years of surviving, not living, just existing. His fingers continued their gentle exploration. Until now. Kaylee's hadn't realized how starved she'd been for touch, for connection. Her people were tactile by nature, communicating as much through contact as through words. 7 years of isolation had left her touch-starved in a way she hadn't fully acknowledged until this moment. Daniel, she whispered, not trusting her voice for more. He withdrew his hand, but the intensity in his eyes remained. Whatever we find tomorrow, Kaylee's, I don't regret meeting you. Remember that. Dawn broke with an ominous red haze that filtered through the toxic clouds. They departed the sanctuary with weapons ready and packs containing only the essentials. Daniel had carefully sealed and hidden the entrance. If they made it back, they would need the shelter more than ever. They followed the river as planned, moving silently through the deadened landscape. Kaylee's ability to sense approaching predators gave them precious seconds of warning several times, allowing them to hide or change course before being detected. By midday, they had covered nearly half the distance. The signal was growing stronger, confirming they were heading in the right direction. As they paused to rest in the hollow of a collapsed highway overpass, Daniel produced a thermal scope from his pack. Nest activity ahead, he reported grimly after scanning the area. More than I expected. Kaylee's took the scope, adjusting it to her vision. What she saw sent a chill through her, dozens of heat signatures moving with disturbing coordination. Not the chaotic movements of mindless predators, but the organized patterns of a collective intelligence. It's like they're patrolling, she observed. Daniel nodded. They've evolved. Each generation gets smarter, more organized. He pointed to a structure barely visible in the distance. That building there, that's where your signal seems to be coming from. Some kind of research facility, maybe. Kaylee's focused on the structure. Yes, that would make sense. My people established several relay points at human research facilities as part of the exchange program. We'll have to wait until dusk, Daniel decided. They're less active during transition periods. As they settled in to wait, Kaylee's found herself studying Daniel's profile. The strong line of his jaw, the vigilant eyes that missed nothing, the hands that could be both lethal and gentle. She had never expected to find such complexity in a human, much less to feel drawn to it. "If the relay is functional," she said hesitantly, "and if I can contact a ship." "Then you go home," Daniel finished for her, his eyes still scanning the horizon. "It's not that simple," she continued. "I could request extraction for both of us. My people owe a debt to Earth. They would not refuse asylum to a human, especially one who helped me." Now Daniel turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. "You'd want me to come with you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had voiced aloud. "I would not leave you behind," Kaylee said firmly. "Not after everything." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "I never thought about leaving Earth," he admitted. "Even after everything it's become, it's still home." "Home is not always a place," Kaylee said softly. "Sometimes it's where you feel whole again." The intensity in Daniel's eyes made her scales ripple once more with those betraying patterns of connection. Before he could respond, however, a distant howl split the air, followed by another and another. Different from the skitters, these calls were more complex, almost speech-like. "They've found our trail," Daniel said, immediately alert. "We can't wait for dusk, we need to move now." They abandoned their shelter, moving at a full run toward the distant facility. The howls grew closer, echoing from multiple directions as the nest creatures coordinated their hunt. Kaylee's could feel the vibrations of multiple pursuers through the ground, too many to fight, too many to evade for long. "There," Daniel pointed to a partially collapsed building about halfway to their destination. "We can make a stand there if we have to." They had almost reached it when the first of the creatures burst from the underbrush, humanoid in general shape but grotesquely altered, with elongated limbs and skin that had hardened into a natural armor. Its face retained just enough human features to make it utterly horrifying. Daniel fired twice, catching it in the head. It fell, but 3 more appeared behind it. "Go," he shouted to Kaylee's. "Get to the building, I'll cover you." She hesitated for only a second before sprinting toward the structure, Daniel backing toward it behind her, firing methodically to keep the creatures at bay. They reached the entrance together, barricading the door behind them with debris. The relative quiet inside was broken only by their heavy breathing and the muffled howls outside. Daniel quickly assessed their location, a former office building, its interior largely intact despite the external damage. "The signal?" he asked between breaths. Kaylee's focused, extending her senses. "Stronger, we're close, it's coming from above us." They found a stairwell and began ascending, aware that the creatures outside would soon find a way in. 4 floors up, Kaylee suddenly stopped, her hand pressed against a wall. "Here," she said, "behind this." Daniel helped her pry open a hidden access panel, revealing a small chamber containing alien technology, a sleek metallic device humming with energy. Kaylee's hands moved over it with practiced familiarity, activating dormant systems. "It's working," she breathed in disbelief. "The emergency power cells are still functional." Her fingers danced over the controls, inputting complex sequences. "I'm sending a broad-spectrum distress call with our coordinates." A crash from below indicated the creatures had breached the building. Daniel positioned himself at the stairwell, weapon ready. "How long?" "I don't know," Kaylee's admitted. "If any ships are still monitoring this sector, they could receive it immediately, if not." Daniel didn't need her to finish the thought. They both knew what "if not" meant. "Keep working," he said grimly. "I'll buy you as much time as I can." The first creature appeared in the stairwell, moving with unnatural speed. Daniel fired, catching it in the chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. A second shot to the head finally dropped it, but 2 more appeared behind it. "Daniel," Kaylee's called. "The relay is transmitting, but I need to maintain the connection manually. The system is degraded." He glanced back, seeing her hands literally inside the device, manipulating its components directly. She was completely vulnerable, unable to defend herself while maintaining the transmission. Daniel made his decision instantly. He fell back to her position, taking a defensive stance directly in front of her. "Keep transmitting," he said. "Don't stop for anything." The creatures poured into the room, more intelligent than the skitters but driven by the same predatory hunger. Daniel fired methodically, dropping them one by one, but there were too many. When his rifle clicked empty, he switched to his sidearm without hesitation. "Signal is getting a response," Kaylee's called, hope surging in her voice. "Something's receiving us." A creature lunged, getting past Daniel's guard. Razor claws raked across his chest, tearing through his protective clothing. He grunted in pain but managed to put a bullet through its skull at point-blank range. "Daniel," Kaylee's cried, seeing the blood spreading across his shirt. "Don't stop," he ordered through gritted teeth, taking down another creature. "Whatever happens, don't stop." The room filled with the sound of gunfire and inhuman screeching as Daniel fought with desperate determination. When his sidearm emptied, he drew his knife, fighting in close quarters against enemies twice his strength. Kaylee's worked frantically, her hands deep in the alien technology, unable to help as Daniel was slowly overwhelmed. She heard his cry of pain as a creature slashed at his back, saw him stumble to one knee but continue fighting. "It's done," she finally called. "Connection established, signal confirmed." She turned just in time to see Daniel go down under 3 of the creatures. Without hesitation, she grabbed his fallen pistol, ejected the empty magazine, and slammed in his last spare. Her shots were precise, dropping all 3 creatures with lethal efficiency. Daniel lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him. Kaylee's rushed to his side, her hands pressing against the worst of his wounds, trying to stem the bleeding. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her scales flickering with distress patterns. "Daniel, stay with me, help is coming." His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. "Did it work?" he whispered. "Yes," she assured him, tears tracking down her alien features. "They received our signal, they're coming." A faint smile touched his lips. "Good," he murmured, "you're going home." "We're going home," she corrected fiercely. "Both of us, I won't leave you, I can't." She stopped, emotions overwhelming her. Daniel's hand weakly rose to touch her face, his fingers tracing the luminescent patterns of fear and something much stronger that now flowed across her skin. "What does this pattern mean?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Kaylee's covered his hand with hers, holding it against her cheek. "It means I found something I never expected to find on this broken world," she whispered. "It means I found you." As consciousness slipped away from him, Daniel's last sight was of Kaylee's face, beautiful in its alien perfection, her scales shimmering with the unmistakable pattern of love. Consciousness returned to Daniel in stages. First sound, a steady electronic hum unlike anything he'd heard in years. Then sensation, the absence of pain where agony should have been. Finally sight, as his eyes opened to unfamiliar surroundings bathed in soft blue light. He was lying on some kind of bed, but unlike any he'd seen since before the collapse. The surface molded to his body, supporting him perfectly. Translucent panels arched overhead, displaying information in an alien script that flowed and changed continuously. "You're awake." Kaylee's voice drew his attention to the side of the room where she stood, watching him with evident relief. She looked different, clean, her scales gleaming with healthy iridescence, wearing fitted clothing made of material that seemed to shift with her movements. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Medical bay of the retrieval vessel Astria," she replied, moving to his side. "They received our transmission and dispatched a scout ship immediately." Her hand hovered near his, almost touching but not quite. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your injuries were extensive." Daniel glanced down at his chest where the creature's claws had torn through flesh and muscle. Fresh pink scars were visible, but otherwise he appeared completely healed. "How?" "Cellular regeneration therapy," Kaylee's explained. "My people's medical technology is considerably advanced compared to Earth's." Memory returned in a rush, the desperate fight, the creatures overwhelming him, Kaylee's voice calling his name as darkness claimed him. "The relay station." "Overrun shortly after we were extracted," she confirmed, "but it served its purpose." Daniel slowly sat up, expecting pain that didn't come. His body felt strange, stronger, more responsive than it had in years. "You said retrieval vessel. Are there others, other survivors being rescued?" A shadow crossed Kaylee's features. "No, this mission was specifically dispatched in response to our signal." She hesitated. "Daniel, there's something you should know." Before she could continue, a section of the wall dissolved, revealing an opening through which another alien entered. Taller than Kaylee's, with scales in deeper blue tones and more pronounced facial features, He regarded Daniel with obvious curiosity. "Commander Varen," Kaylee's acknowledged, straightening her posture. "This is Daniel Carter, the human I told you about." "The one who protected you," Varen stated, his English accented but clear. "You have our gratitude, Daniel Carter." Daniel nodded cautiously, studying the commander. "Your ship, are you here to help Earth?" Varen and Kaylee's exchanged a glance that sent a chill through Daniel. "There is much to explain," Varen said. "When you are fully recovered, we will speak further." With that, he left, the wall reforming behind him. "Kaylee's," Daniel said quietly. "What's going on?" She sat beside him on the edge of the bed, finally allowing her hand to rest on his. "Earth has been quarantined," she said bluntly. "After the evacuation 7 years ago, the Interstellar Council declared this solar system off-limits due to the mutations. No rescue missions, no contact, no interference of any kind." "They just abandoned an entire planet?" Daniel asked incredulously. "The mutations were spreading too rapidly, becoming too unpredictable," Kaylee's explained. "There was fear they might spread beyond Earth if contact continued." Her eyes held profound sadness. It was a measure of last resort. "Then why are you here now?" "Because I activated an emergency beacon," she said. "Protocol requires investigation of all distress signals, even from quarantined zones." She squeezed his hand. "Commander Varen bent several regulations by extracting both of us instead of just me. He risked much." Daniel absorbed this information slowly. "So what happens now?" "We're scheduled to rendezvous with the main fleet at the edge of your solar system," Kaylee said. "After debriefing, I'll be reassigned." She hesitated, then added, "As for you, the Council will have to decide." The implication was clear. He was an unauthorized extraction from a quarantined world, potentially carrying who knew what mutations or contaminants despite their medical treatment. "I'm a problem for them," he stated flatly. "You're under my protection," Kaylee's countered firmly. "I've already informed Varen that your status is non-negotiable. Where I go, you go." Daniel studied her, seeing a new confidence, a strength that had always been there but was now backed by the authority of her position. "And where exactly are you going?" A small smile touched her lips. "That depends partly on you." The next few days passed in a blur of medical examinations, debriefings, and gradual exposure to the reality of life aboard an alien vessel. Daniel learned that the Astria was a small scout ship with a crew of only 12, all of whom regarded him with varying degrees of curiosity and caution. Commander Varen had granted him limited access to the ship under Kaylee's supervision. She showed him the observation deck, where he stood for hours staring at the blue-green orb of Earth receding in the distance. From space, it still looked beautiful, its scars invisible, its corruption hidden beneath swirling clouds. "Do you regret leaving?" Kaylee's asked softly, joining him at the viewport. "I don't know," he admitted. "It was hell, but it was home." He turned to her. "But I've lost so much there, buried so many, maybe it's time to let go." Kaylee's moved closer, her shoulder brushing his in a gesture of comfort. Over the past days, they had maintained a careful distance in public, aware of the crew's scrutiny. But in these quiet moments, the connection that had formed between them in Earth's wasteland resurfaced, stronger than before. "The Council representatives will meet with us tomorrow when we reach the fleet," she informed him. "I've prepared a formal petition for your asylum." "And if they refuse?" Her scales rippled with a pattern he now recognized as determination. "They won't." The next morning, Daniel dressed in clothing provided by the ship's fabrication system. A simple tunic and pants that felt like nothing he'd ever worn before, lightweight yet surprisingly durable. Kaylee's arrived to escort him to the shuttle bay, wearing formal attire that marked her official status. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," he replied, trying to mask his anxiety. The shuttle journey to the main vessel was brief but awe-inspiring. The fleet that came into view consisted of ships of various sizes, some as large as small cities, arranged in a precise formation at the edge of the solar system. The central command ship, their destination, dwarfed the others, a massive structure of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields. Inside, they were escorted to a chamber where 3 council representatives waited, one of Kaylee's species, one humanoid but clearly not human, and a third that defied easy description, its form shifting subtly as if not fully committed to a single shape. Specialist Kaylee's, the Sarian representative acknowledged. We have reviewed your preliminary report. Your survival is remarkable. Thank you, Counselor, Kaylee's replied formally. As stated in my petition, I owe my life to Daniel Carter. Without his intervention, I would not stand before you today. The representatives turned their attention to Daniel, their gazes unnervingly penetrating. Human, the shifting entity addressed him, its voice resonating oddly in his mind rather than his ears. Your kind's experiment with our genetic technologies led to catastrophe, yet you personally bear no responsibility for those actions. A curious ethical dilemma. I didn't come here for judgment, Daniel said evenly. I came because Kaylee's asked me to. The humanoid counselor tilted its head. You trust her implicitly, despite the historical tensions between your species. I trust her because I know her, Daniel replied simply. Not her species, her. A moment of silence followed as the counselors communicated amongst themselves in a way Daniel couldn't perceive. Finally, the Sarian spoke. Your petition presents complications, Specialist Kaylee's. The quarantine protocols are absolute. However, your service record and the unique circumstances warrant consideration. Another pause. The human will be granted provisional status under your sponsorship. You will be personally responsible for his integration and monitoring. Relief washed over Kaylee's features, her scales briefly flashing with joy before she composed herself. Thank you, counselors. I accept full responsibility. As for your reassignment, the Sarian continued, given your experience with Earth's botany and the contamination effects, you are being appointed to the Restoration Science Division. Your research on radiation-adaptive plants may prove valuable for future rehabilitation efforts. This news clearly surprised Kaylee's. Rehabilitation, but the quarantine will remain in effect for the foreseeable future, the counselor clarified. But the Council has authorized long-term research into potential reclamation strategies. Earth will not be abandoned forever, Specialist. As they left the chamber, Daniel could see Kaylee's processing this information, hope and professional excitement battling with the memories of Earth's horrors. Rehabilitation, she murmured. It's more than I expected. Does that mean we might go back someday? Daniel asked. Kaylee's looked at him sharply. Would you want to? He considered this. Not now, maybe not for a very long time, but eventually. Yes, there are still good people there, Kaylee's, people who deserve a chance. She nodded slowly. Then we'll work toward that day. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining, together. 1 year later, Daniel stood at the viewport of their quarters aboard the research vessel Helix, watching the stars streak by as they traveled between systems. The room around him reflected their shared life, his small collection of Earth artifacts alongside Kaylee's scientific equipment, furniture designed to accommodate both human and Sarian physiology, and in the corner, a thriving garden of hybrid plants born from those first alien seeds they had planted together in Daniel's sanctuary. He had adapted to this new life better than anyone, including himself, had expected. The crew had gradually accepted him, his unique perspective on Earth's mutations proving valuable to their research. He wasn't a scientist, but his practical knowledge complemented Kaylee's theoretical expertise in ways that had already led to breakthroughs in understanding how certain plants had adapted to Earth's changed conditions. The door slid open, and Kaylee's entered, her scales glowing with the subtle pattern that, he had learned, was unique to how she felt about him. A combination of love, admiration, and contentment that she couldn't hide even if she wanted to. The latest samples are showing promising results, she reported, crossing to him. The radiation absorption rate is nearly double what we projected. Daniel smiled, drawing her into an embrace that still amazed him with how perfectly they fit together despite their physiological differences. So your radical botanist reputation remains intact. She laughed, the sound musical and free in a way it had never been on Earth. The department director called my approach unorthodox but effective. I believe that was a compliment. It was definitely a compliment, Daniel assured her, brushing his lips against her forehead in a gesture that had become their own unique form of intimacy. Neither fully human nor Sarian, but something new they had created together. Later that night, as they lay entwined in the soft glow of the stars through their viewport, Kaylee's traced the scars on Daniel's chest, now faded but still visible despite the advanced medical treatment. Do you ever regret it, she asked softly, coming with me? Daniel caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Never," he said with absolute certainty. "Earth gave me Ellie, and I'll always be grateful for that, but it also gave me you." He smiled at the luminescent patterns flowing across her skin in response to his words. "And somewhere in all that horror and loss, I found something I thought was gone forever." "What?" she whispered. "A future worth fighting for," he replied simply. Kaylee's shifted closer, her body fitting against his in perfect harmony. "The Council approved my proposal today," she murmured. "We're authorized to establish the first remote monitoring station at the edge of Earth's quarantine zone. It's small, but it's a beginning." Hope and determination filled Daniel's heart, not just for himself, not just for Kaylee's, but for the broken world they had left behind. Somewhere on that distant blue planet, other survivors were fighting, enduring, perhaps even finding their own unexpected connections amidst the ruins. Someday they would return, not as fugitives running from monsters, but as harbingers of renewal. Earth would heal. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, but it would heal. And when it did, it would be because two unlikely survivors, an alien botanist and a human fighter, had found in each other the strength to believe in second chances. For now, though they had the stars, they had each other, and they had time, the luxury that a dying Earth had never afforded them. As Kaylee's drifted to sleep in his arms, Daniel gazed out at the distant points of light, no longer feeling like a refugee from a destroyed world. He was home, and somewhere in the vast, endless cosmos, so was Earth waiting,